So my name's Kath Williams, and this is Sharon Raymond and Jane Glynn. And Sharon and I are matrons at Plymouth Hospital down in the southwest, and Jane is the patient experience manager. So last year we were tasked with, let's put the 6 C's into everyday practice. So everybody sat there thinking, how are we going to do that? And we were looking at complaints. I'd read a recent complaint that was really quite traumatic at the time about somebody that had died, and we really, what came from that was that as soon as people get the death certificate, and I'm sure it's very similar in everybody else's hospital, there is no contact then for the hospital to the patient. And the only option then, really, if people have got questions or queries, is to write a formal letter of complaint, which seemed a bit cold, really. So we had to sit down and think about it and discussed it with matrons, etc., etc. We decided that, well, what good practice is already out there within the trust already? So, and we wanted to sort of improve the communications with the family and be a bit more proactive, really, with answering complaints. And making people feel supported much better than they were. I mean, I don't know whether many people know about Plymouth. It is a bucket beyond, I've got to say. But it's a massive, it's a big hospital. It's over 1,000 beds. It's a trauma centre. We have a fair share of bereavement throughout the hospital. And there's a lot of people just being thrown lots and lots of information into them at that really traumatic and stressful time. And you're not taking it all in. And there's no wonder then sometimes down the line that people are thinking, well, hang on a minute, or they've got their wires crossed, there's a miscommunication. So we thought, actually, we need to demonstrate as a trust, we need to be honest and open, and we wanted to forge that trust within the community with the local hospital. And so we initiated bereavement cards, which were already being done in areas such as, and I'm sure some of you already do this, ICU, renal, oncology and haematology, and certainly the last 3 are areas where people have long-term patients. So you build a relationship up, and it's not unheard of then for the consultant to perhaps write a note or to ring them and that sort of thing. But it wasn't something that was done throughout the trust. So we had a bright idea that actually, why can't everybody do this? So that was the idea. So we needed to get our matron colleagues on board. Matron colleagues are, as you know, can be really supportive or actually can be quite difficult. And thankfully in this circumstance, they actually could see the good reason behind this, because they dealt with people and picking up the pieces of things going wrong within the hospital a lot of the time. And they could actually see, when we actually spoke it about in our matrons meeting, that actually, yeah, this would be a really good thing. This would be a really good thing to get into the bouts and get involved in and try and help people along the way. So the action that we took originally was to integrate into the matrons meeting, talking about it, trying to iron out any problems, any teething problems that we thought that may occur with rolling this out. And then we had to get the senior sisters on board, which, again, if you can get that group of people on board and you can get them champion something for you, it will run. If you do it wrong, yeah, you haven't got a chance. Thankfully, they are all on board. So we engaged with the bereavement and the patient experience team as well to say, well, how can we actually do this? Because each individual ward doing it might be just not consistent. So we decided, after having conversations with Jane and the team, that the bereavement team were going to own this. So they gave out the bereavement, they gave out the death certificates, and therefore we're in a prime position to say, well, actually, in a couple of weeks' time, I can write this letter and send this card to those patients' families. So that's what happened, and we designed the card, and we also decided a date on rolling it out, and the process, which I'll hand Jane over to because it's her team that actually deals with that. I'll just give you
pictures. Oh yeah, go on. Yeah,
okay.
Keep going.
Oh, look at that.
Fancy.
Did I do that?
No.
No.
That's why we didn't know it was there.
That's why I didn't know.
Because we have assistance with our PowerPoints, obviously. So, as Kath described, we'd sort of got to a certain point, and we'd agreed in principle what we felt would be a really nice approach and how we would manage it. Then came the tricky bit, pick the cards. How are we going to get these pictures? So we're very lucky. We have a critical care consultant in the hospital that's pretty handy with a camera and has a whole website of pictures. So we spent about a week, I think, in the end, poring over different images that wouldn't be too morbid, if you like, and too upbeat. There's a real balance to be had in choosing a picture. So we were quite pleased, actually, with where we ended up with our 5 designs. I think we probably could have had a dozen in the end, but we felt that wasn't necessarily very practical. Let's hope that this works now. Yes. Then came the next challenge. We needed to think about what were the words that we were going to put in this card. We wouldn't necessarily be able to manage writing everything out individually. We needed some consistency, but something that would be sensitive to each individual family situation. So we have our set wording that goes into each card. The bereavement team will actually personally handwrite in the name of the next of kin. So there is some element of personalisation of the card, and each card is signed by our chief executive and James. So it was all quite straightforward as such. Keeps going. Right, process. So we just thought it would be helpful to run through the actual process itself and how that works and what we do and what each of the stages are. So you'll see up on the screen, obviously, we do start with the patient's death and how we manage that. So you'll all have bereavement teams, some sort or another, and we have quite prescribed arrangements that we need to go through. They culminate in the production of a certificate of cause of death. The bereavement team are responsible for handing that certificate out. So they're able at that point, obviously, to identify who the next of kin is, who's the main point of contact. I think just be aware that sometimes the next of kin is not necessarily the person that you may be liaising with throughout this process. So you do have to be aware of that whole family situation, who you're going to be talking to, and who is the best person to send a card to. So once we've got through all of that, we also have to do an additional check, so to make sure that we don't have any complaints already in the system, that there aren't maybe any incidents that are being investigated, because there can't be anything worse than receiving a bereavement card when actually, and it says, if you've got any questions and you'd like to come and talk to us, and they're thinking, well, actually, you already are, but just through a different process. So you do need to have this sort of internal governance that allows you to understand maybe other mechanisms that might already be in place. And then 4 weeks after we've handed out the certificate, we send the next of kin a card inviting them to come in and raise any questions if they have any with the team. They'll contact the bereavement team. They then in turn contact the matrons, who then decide at that point who are the best people for us to speak to, who are the best people to be involved. And then it just goes forward from that point. We're able to actually answer any questions and deal with any inquiries that the family have. So I'll hand over to my colleague, Sharon.
Okay, I'm very short of time. I've got 1 minute. It's all right. I don't mind. So what are the benefits? Well, so far we started this process last June. We sent out 523 bereavement cards and we've had 32 face-to-face contacts. That doesn't include the numerous phone calls that we've had, because as matrons, I get an email saying, please contact this relative. I will often contact them, and just that over-the-phone conversation with me is enough for them. They don't often want to come back into the hospital to meet somebody. So obviously, it's an opportunity for them to clarify facts and with the relevant professionals. A lot of the calls I've had, I haven't actually dealt with personally. I've passed it to my consultant colleagues because there have been medical questions. And it might have been things that they've told of at the time, but because of the difficulty and of the situation, they're not taking in all the information that's given to them at the time. So it's time just to recap and go over the things that they've missed. Oh, 1 second. And obviously, we want the relatives to feel better supportive. It's obviously for staff, I feel as a matron, when I'm speaking to the patients over the relatives over the phone, that, you know, you have got that job satisfaction. You're there. You know, sometimes I've got the relative in tears on the phone because they haven't come to terms with their loved one's death. And just being able to talk them through the support services that are available to them. You know, I come off the phone thinking, I've actually done some good today. All right, I'll get off.
I didn't say a word. Well done.